Yo, it is about that time. I want to welcome you all wherever you are in the world. This show is growing and we wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. This is the Outside the Box podcast. I am Jacques Slade. I am part of the trifecta. I am part of the triangle. If you only had 3 fingers, I would be the middle one. We're here today, and we're really excited about the show. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about. Again, I'm Jacques. You can find me at Cousteau all over the internet. But this show wouldn't be what it is without the other 2 hosts on this show. They are the boat. They are the float. They are the foundation. I am simply the flare. Nick, tell them who you are and tell them where they can find you.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like the oar in this boat then? Is that? But yeah, my name is Nick Engvall. I've been working in the sneaker business for, a decade or so. And you can find me at Nick Engvall, NickEngvall on all platforms. Also have a website called Sneaker History that you can check out. Same name on all platforms. But really, like I said, I'm just the oar here. Most importantly is the captain. Tiffany, introduce yourself.
I don't do boats, so this boat analogy is not really working for me. But I'm a plastics engineer. I was at Nike for 13 years, worked on products like the Nike Mag and the Hyper Adapt. And now I have a YouTube channel, and you can find me at Tiffany Beers on YouTube and on Instagram.
I heard you slip it in there. I don't know if the audience caught it, but I caught it. So this show, the Outside the Box podcast, we learn something new about Tiffany every single week. We know she was an innovator. We knew she was a creator. We knew that she worked at Rubbermaid. We knew she worked at Nike. We knew about the Air Mag, but we did not know that she was a plastics engineer. And I'm just telling you guys, the more this show goes on, the more I respect Tiffany Beers and realize that I really don't know anything at all. Like it's incredible. I love it. Anyway, all right. So this show, we have a really great sponsor for you guys today, and I'll tell you guys about the sponsor later. They didn't pay for the upfront part of the advertising, so we'll talk about them later in the show. But the first topic we want to cover is something that I think a lot of sneakerheads have some very, very strong opinions about. And it's collabs and hype sneakers versus classic and GR sneakers. In other words, for the love of money or for the love of the game. And this topic was brought to us by MJ023 Dan on Twitter. So if you're not following him, go ahead and give him a follow and check him out. He has some very interesting stuff. And actually, he is the one that brought to light the whole story about the banned Jordan 1s. If you don't know, so look that up. It's over on Soul Collector. So my opinion here, I love classics and I love hype sneakers. So there is not a versus battle for me. But for a lot of people, classics and GRs, they're like, I'm good on that. I just want the hype stuff. I just want the hype stuff that's going to get me noticed. I have a feeling that you two are in the same boat that I'm in, but I could be wrong about that. So, Tiffany, are you in the same boat here?
I'm not. I mean, I'm a purist, and so I'm a strong fan of the classic. But I'm getting more. I don't know. I think there's a place for both of them. Like, if you compare it to cars, like, you have car shows where everybody can bring their stuff out. But just because you're brought to a car show doesn't mean it's, like, the fastest car in the world or the best race car. So you still have performance, and then you still have, like, showy show. So I think they both survive just fine.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the car analogy is great, too, because if you're into cars at all, you've seen, what you would say is like the classic originally restored, hot rod or whatever. And then you've seen like what they would call a resto mod, where it's kind of like, they've restored it to, maybe 70%, but then they've customized the last 30% to make it perform the way it should nowadays. Kind of think of like the Kobe like retro protro whatever. But you know, my opinion on this is I kind of love both, and I think the thing that people have to realize is like, yes, there's like hype shoes, yes, there's like classic shoes, but the reality is like the most successful things I think come from when there's a perfect balance of both, right? Like,
right.
I don't get me wrong. I think that like, you know, you should have a pair of, you know, Air Max 1s in your collection. You should have a pair of Jordan 3s. You should have a pair of Chucks. Everyone should own like, you know, the 10, 15 basic, these are the sneakers that you need to know about kind of shoes in like original colorways or close to it. But then I think like a good example is like the Para collaboration that's going to come out, right? Like there's, you know, an Air Max 1. It's basically, let's see, he's done like a 2005 collab. He's done like a 2009 Air Maxim one, which was like the kind of fused upper. Then he's done like a 2010, I think, was like the Cherry Woods. And like, you know, like he's constantly working with Nike, but every time he does a version of the Air Max 1 for whatever special occasion or whatever, just like bring them back in and work together again, it just lights up everybody, you know, like anybody that collects Air Maxes is like absolutely, you know, excited for that. And I think like, yeah, there's some like this new one is a little wild as far as the colors go. It's not just like your easy wearable, like pretty basic tonal stuff, but like that's kind of good in the sense that like you're getting to a point where he's getting a little more creative freedom. He's getting a little more crazy with the colors that he's getting to do, and it represents his art, you know, because if you look at his art, if you've been to his shows, it's all over the place. There's so many different styles that he is creating for every show that this really represents like a broad version of, you know, kind of like the strokes of what he's putting up on the wall in his shows. So I personally, I think there's no real either or. I think that it's better when like people respect both sides of it and understand that like both of these things coexist, and we as consumers really like benefit when something cool happens in the middle of them, you know, like that's like the huge win for everybody in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that 100%. I think this really argument about the hype versus classics and GRs, it really boils down to resellers. I think that's kind of what it is, like, because, you know, in his tweet he says for the love of money or the love of the game, and you know I feel like the general consensus or the thought is that if you are a reseller, you don't have love for the game, but I kind of think that's not necessarily true. I think there are some resellers, the bigger ones, that have a genuine love for the game, that have been in the game for a long time, and they're looking at this as, you know, it's something I love, but it's also something that I can make a living off of. So I guess I say all that to say that maybe there is really not a beef per se, but that's more of, I guess, what people like to project because maybe they can't get something, or because only like the younger generation is going after the hype stuff because they haven't had the time to appreciate what's old quite yet.
Yeah.
Or they don't have that time to respect it yet. So all they get is what's cool right now, because that's kind of going to want to set the trends for them. But
I would even argue too, like, you know, like to Marvin's point about that for the love of money versus the game. I think that, you know, he's one of those people that is very passionate about this stuff, and he is so important now more than ever to be passionate about like finding those original stories and bringing them out. You know, like he is the guy that I think best told the shattered backboard story before that shoe even came out. It might have been, or you know, when that shoe first came out, and explained that there was two jerseys. Like without that, like Nike's not going to go that in depth, I don't think. You know, they try to on some things, but they're also going to sell you something. Every brand is selling you something. So like Marvin's place in like kind of the community, I think is very like important to kind of guide those stories and also keep some of the brands in check and some of the people that are out there doing stuff in check. But I do agree that, like, you know, my friend Matt actually just sent me some pictures yesterday of like he's in outside of Chicago, but he ended up like kind of going hunting through like an old store that had a basement full of old stock. And, he makes his living right now selling shoes. but like a lot of that stuff would just sit and nobody would find it. And without him having the passion to go hunt down all these, kind of old things and the thrill of the hunt, so to speak, those shoes just sit and fall apart, and somebody ends up throwing them away usually. So I think there's a lot of people that have that balance, and going to the other side of it, the hype side, like where you're talking about, for the most part, you're talking about Yeezys, or you're talking about like super limited Jordans. And those kind of things will always kind of live in their own space. At one point, it was the collectors that were going after the really limited stuff. So you had like the Clark Kent 112 pack, like that was one of those shoes that like not everybody, if you had to be into sneakers to pay attention to it, or like even further back, like Dunks, like you had to really love the shoes to even go after the stuff to keep some of those, like the Tokyos or the Parises that were like just ridiculously hard to get here in the States. So I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting question, and I'm curious to know like really what like the younger generation of, like Marvin, I think is probably closer to my age or our age. And I think like we kind of fall in the same place on a lot of that stuff, but I'm curious to think of like what the nostalgic piece to the kids that are buying Yeezys right now, because that's a very important piece to keep the business of sneakers moving forward, in my opinion. Because if all these consumers that are buying the hype stuff right now lose interest in 2 or 3 years, then all the brands see a drop in sales, and you're into this kind of like tough spot of like, how do we get back to the golden days or the better days of sales?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I love something that you said, that it's really important for guys like Marvin to be around, because it can kind of help pass on that knowledge and pass on that passion to those that are growing up into the sneaker world today that don't necessarily have that knowledge. That's what I really love about what Tiffany does on her channel.
Yeah, absolutely.
She really goes into detail and really gives like an education on the shoe, and I think that's something that people will be able to look back to years from now and be able to pull from, to really tell the complete story of a shoe, and with the technical aspects as well, because that's not necessarily something that the Jordan generation has the ability to do, because those sort of technical details that Tiffany goes into, that sort of stuff wasn't given to sneakerheads back then, but now they'll be armed with that. And I mean, even from a brand side, I think brands will be able to kind of use that as a resource and look back and go, oh, okay, this is the weight of the rubber that we were using, and this is the softness or hardness of the stuff that we were using. So the conversations that you hear now from a lot of Jordan heads, like, oh, this isn't the same foam, or this isn't the same air, or this isn't the same leather, or whatever it is, like they can reference back to Tiffany's stuff and pull that information. But anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, guys. Nice little plug there.
No.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, nice little plug.
I often, when I'm making videos and stuff, I would love to know some of that history on some of those old Jordans, like original 3. Like, even if you measured it now, it wouldn't be, the materials deteriorated, right? So it would be a different reading than it originally came out. Like, that would be awesome if we had some data on that back in the day.
Yeah, that'd be dope. That'd be dope. All right, and switching topics here, because transitions are my expertise, and I'm going to make this one super smooth and awkward at the same time. Tiffany sent an article around in our group chat. Again, I just want to put it out there that I am in a group chat with Tiffany Beers. About being a kid and how shoes affect you as a kid. And this is just something that was just really eye-opening to me, and it's more of just kind of like fun fact part of the show. So this is the, fun fact, fun fact on the outside about the podcast sort of thing. So can you kind of talk to us about a little bit about that article, Tiffany?
Sure. It was basically a bunch of fine folks at a bunch of fine universities tested a whole bunch of kids, and what they did is they had a group of kids do the basically physical testing with shoes and a group do without shoes. And they found that the kids without shoes, that were not wearing shoes, were able to have better balance, and they were like better at the long jump. So they were better at balancing and jumping. Now the kids that wore the shoes, they call it shod, they were better at sprinting. And so they went on to discuss in this article from Eureka Alert, or Eureka Alert, kind of merges there together.
Yeah.
They went on to discuss that that basically not wearing shoes, they've done some studies where showing that where kids that don't wear shoes or wear very, very minimal shoes have better motor skill development than kids that have their feet in shoes. And I've heard this over the years several times. And so it was interesting to see all this new research coming out. So I guess if you got little ones, try and keep them in bare feet until they go to sprint, and then make sure they have shoes on. I guess that's...
Yeah, then make sure they have shoes. That's interesting, because that's, for the people that are listening to the show, the Nike Free was sort of developed on that concept of being barefoot. Tinker's brother, and I cannot think of his... Toby Hatfield was at Stanford, I believe it was, and he saw people running without shoes, and that gave him the idea. It's something along that story. I'm probably doing a terrible job of paraphrasing the story of how the Nike Free came to be, but it's based on that sort of thing. So, and I've always wondered about that. I guess imagine that walking without shoes literally makes your foot stronger, because there's nothing there to protect it, and it's having full contact with the ground. If I understand this correctly, please feel free to jump in and be like, Jacques, no.
No, actually,
at any time.
I think even further back, right? The Air Rift was like when it's probably 95 or 96. That was like very
split toe.
The split toe. Yeah, that was actually I think done for like long distance runners in Kenya, because they were running barefoot at that time, and that was like the whole concept of those too. So.
Yeah, so your foot basically, I think the connection is with the kids is like when they're developing and learning to walk. Like if you have shoes on, you just feel whatever that shoe contact is making with the ground. But if you're barefoot, your body's perceiving a lot more information, and it's building the network of channels and communication throughout the body, and it just does it faster because you're getting better input, if you will. So I think that's where kind of some of the communication or the concepts coming from. And then same with Nike Free, right? You can, if you've worn like Free 3.0s, if you throw those on for a couple days and you don't break into them, your feet get sore and tired, right? Because it's building the muscles, but also you feel a lot more of what's going on. If you walk on gravel and some really lightweight Frees, you feel each pod underfoot moving. So it's all about like sensory and perception underfoot.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I mean, it's more of just like a fun fact. So if you have kids, or if that's something that you guys have ever thought about, that this takes the sneaker thing to another level. It's just super interesting to me to see that sort of thing. I always wondered about like running and how like there's an older generation, like they're okay with wearing Chucks, like they can wear Chucks all the time and it doesn't necessarily bother them. But like the younger generation, they can't. I feel like they can't wear them basically because they hurt their feet, just because they're so flat and they're not used to wearing that type of shoe. Everything that's made these days is basically full of foam and EVA and cushioning and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to a Chuck Taylor where it's like you're just walking on cardboard almost. It feels like sometimes.
Yep.
So that's cool. I thought that was pretty cool. So. Leaving again the master of the transition, Jacques Slade here. Something that is of interest to me in particular is content creation for brands. With the amount of creators that are out there, a lot of them have been moved into a place where they're able to actually create content for brands from taking their passion to a point where they can create content for brands. There's a lot of feelings about this. Some think it's good, some think it's bad. I'll reserve my opinion, and I'll let you guys tackle this one. So I'm gonna toss this one to you, Nick, and see like what are your thoughts about influencers or people with a passion for the product creating content.
I mean, I think that it's incredibly powerful, right? Like like Vince Sirico, who actually sent that question in, has been working with Adidas. We worked with him at Finish Line years ago. He's just a great photographer. He understands like the consumer. side of things, and he's passionate about this stuff, and he's just created a lot of great content. And I think that reflects nicely for the brands that work with him, right? And I think you could say that with anybody that really cares about what they're putting out there. There's a lot of times where it's going to be a little long-winded, but we did this thing with Nike. When I was at Finish Line with I forget what it was, Air Max 2015, 2016, something like that, where the campaign was called Dare to Air, and I didn't want to give that shoe to somebody and tell them to create content that was based on running. Although Nike considers that their pinnacle Air Max a running shoe, right? But from a consumer standpoint, nobody really runs in the Air Max. That shoe is just like a stunt shoe. Like, that's the shoe you wear because you want the guy across the street or down the block to see the brand new $200, $250 shoe on your foot, right? Like, it's more about like really just showing off that you're paying attention and you're the person that's knowing what the newest, latest, greatest Air Max is, right? And
right.
We did this thing where like you were actually involved in that, Jacques. Like you kind of were one of the people that stepped out of the running element, right? And I think that like it's important for Nike to tell a running story for the main consumer that's just going to see the swoosh and a big air bubble and think that's a cool shoe, I want to get it. But in order for a shoe to become popular within like kind of that 20% of the sneaker community that really drives the energy part of the business, I think those stories are better told in a very like authentic way. And the best way to do that is with influencers. Like, let somebody that's super passionate about it. I think of like your stuff with that campaign with the photos from the helicopter above Dodger Stadium and above Santa Monica, and like Foamer had Mr. Foamer Simpson had a great video about the streets of New York City and how the Air Max line is tied to New York City. I mean, it was like so good in the way that everything was woven together with his story on that's the kind of thing that I think is like a game changer in the way things are created. I think that it's a beautiful thing for creators, and it's also a beautiful thing for brands, because brands can go and create their content and tell the story that they want to tell, create the big mass media campaigns that you're going to see billboards on Sunset, you're going to see, on the subways in New York. But then you can also take that down, kind of like we talked about before, to like a more focused level of content creation. And now you're in front of the hype beasts, the sneakerheads, the collectors, the OGs, the old school dudes, all of that stuff, because you've given a small percentage of your marketing budget to this other group to kind of run with it and do their own thing. And like, to me, that's like just it's a fine line, and a lot of brands haven't even gone down that path far enough, in my opinion. But I think that there's always going to be a balance there in order for that to work. So
I think it's challenging because the last thing you want is misinformation. And that's where I tend to have a little bit of issue with it. Like, there's a lot of misinformation on products out there, and it's hard for the brand to police it all, So I think it's definitely a necessity moving forward that they have to have influencers, and they have to have, it's the best way to reach everybody and everywhere, Nike as a sports brand, for example, they're gonna reach elite athletes, and then the hype shoes are gonna reach the hype beasts, and then the sneaker culture. But what about all those other people that don't pay attention to any of that? They're gonna reach them through an influencer. And so I think it's a great strategy, but like, I think figuring out a way to make sure all the information, and like I said earlier, I'm a purist, so like I want all my data to be correct, and as an engineer, I want the information to be correct. I think it's super challenging to kind of police everything and edit everything and have some level of control over the information that does represent your brand.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think one of the biggest challenges, related to this is like the way that brands handle communications and the way that brands handle PR. Like I don't want to pick on anybody, but there's a lot of brands that have a lot of people that have been doing the same thing for a long time. And that's not going to get like product seeding to the same group of people or sending out your press release to the same group of people doesn't reach the people that the diversity that you need in order to truly push like new product out there, in my opinion, with the right message, right? And I think that's that's also like the flip side of that is that's like the beauty of like the content that you're creating, Tiffany, with YouTube, right? Like it's so valuable, and it might not be like the instant, like I look at you and Jacques and the content that you create on YouTube as like kind of like looking at like the last conversation we had where it's like, the money versus the love, right? Like not that Jacques out there just chasing money, but he's getting the super crazy product a lot of the times, and that gets a lot of views. But there's a longer term play there with your content, Tiffany, where it's like that's value that can last for a long time.
Yeah. So Tiffany, do you ever you come from an interesting position where you worked for a brand directly. Do you see yourself creating content for a brand somewhere down the line in this YouTube space?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd love to. I mean, if a brand wanted me to, I think it'd be super cool. I'd be so honored. I mean, that's like, I think they are very careful in who they pick and everything, like, you, Jacques, and so I would absolutely consider it, but my hang up is going to be like, I'm going to have to love the product. Otherwise you're going to get my honest opinion. And, I can't really sway from that as an engineer. Like, I'm going to tell you the facts that I see. So,
right.
I think that probably will be a downfall for me.
But I think that that's like a really cool value though too, like maybe not working directly with, a brand on every single product, but I think that like, I feel like we all kind of have a similar mindset when it comes to this stuff where it's like we're going to look at things and have an honest opinion about it, and we're also going to find certain things within these categories or brands or whatever that we really just truly like and enjoy. And it's like, like I thought your video that you just did with the EQT from Adidas, right? Like the buzz around that shoe was crazy because it was like, oh, this shoe is super comfortable. There's so much boost, blah, blah, blah. And I love that with your video, Tiffany, you were just like, I still love the Ultra Boost, because I feel the same way. I was like, the EQT I think it looks cool, but I think that the Ultra Boost is just still like the most comfortable shoe to just throw on a daily basis all the time. And I thought you kind of said that well, and I think that honesty is I think a lot of the conversation between creating for the brands and creating for yourself to be able to keep that kind of authenticity, because as the brands create more stories on their own, there's the counterpoint and the authenticity of like, I bought these and I just really didn't like them,
No, I think that's important across the board. Like even with the content that I create, I try to make sure, like I always make sure I take the angle of something that I like. If it's something that I don't like, then I don't do it. I think it's as an influencer and as someone that gives information and provides educational content, I think that the position that Tiffany and I are in, like we have to be honest, we have to be clear that if we're being paid, we need to say that we're being paid. If not, so that people understand that they know that we're giving them the right information and we're not just being paid off. And I think that's super duper important for everyone. Even every influencer, like don't work with someone just for the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, especially,
I think, like, sorry to cut you off, I think that's like so important. Like, as somebody who's sent product to people, paid people to do content for me, I think that the most important things are exactly what you said. Be transparent. When you get paid for something, if you're posting your opinion about something and you're paid to post that opinion, you should be telling people that. Like if you're posting about something and getting paid, like there's a lot of companies right now that are paying people to talk about their product, and it's not doing any good because you're just covering up the truth and like saying, oh yeah, I got this free, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I think more importantly, like content creators, like you really should be considering every time someone reaches out to you to send a product, say that you like it or don't like it, because that allows them to then kind of be better focused on the product that they get to you. And also it allows for other people that might like that product to give a better, kind of story or create more, because, like we're all the same in a sense that like if we're not really into a product, like if somebody handed me a pair of Timberlands, like I don't live in Detroit anymore, like I don't need a pair of Timberlands, like I have no desire to talk about them or post them on my channel. It's great if I live in the winter weather, but like why would I ever have that in California? Like, that's just my opinion, but like that's kind of a waste of money on the brand side. It means that the next time around that they're going to see less returns on that marketing budget that they spent. So it just creates a whole much bigger problem when people are not truthful with people. And I think like, for companies, like all they really need to do is like build relationships and understand what works for the creator and what they like. Because if you're sending something to somebody that they don't like, it's only going to hurt both sides of that, because you're not going to see people are going to see that you're not into it, and the brands aren't going to get any real value from it anyway. So like let people know what you're into, and then hopefully you can create cooler content and better content for both sides of the storytelling, right? Like that, at least in my opinion. Sorry, I got on a little tangent there, but
No, I agree 100%. Like, and I've taken the angle where if I don't like it, I don't talk about it on my channel.
Yep.
And that's more of because I know people work very hard on these designs, and they work really hard at creating these things, and I don't want to trash somebody, so I take it as if I just don't talk about it at all on my channel. Everything on my channel is something that I genuinely like. There's tons of sneakers here and tons of shoes here that come through the studio that just sit here and never get brought up, never get shown, because it's not something that I like, or I tried it and I hated it, and I just didn't want to transmit that sort of energy into the world. So, but that's just my angle. That's just the angle that I decided to take.
Yeah, and like for mine, I always end up voicing if I like it or don't like it, but most of my content is about what is it, like specifically what is it and how does it compare to something else, so that, because people, I think what I'm hoping to get across on my channel somewhat is that like everybody's feet are different, therefore everybody feels comfort in a different way, and everybody feels stability in a different way, and so it's not consistent, right? And so as long as people find something they feel comfortable, they should be happy. But going back to the content creation, like I think it'd be super cool if, like, you know how YouTube goes out and like helps their creators make better content, right? They teach them how. Like if Nike or Adidas or Puma went out and like found all these people with these great stories of their product and helped them create a piece of content, like that would be amazing, right? Because then you get the genuinity of the story and the person. And they don't have to necessarily be a content creator, because content creators eventually you already start to see it becoming the same. Like you try and find your niche. It's kind of cookie cutter. You can look it all up on YouTube,
Right. Yeah.
So like this brand assisted content creation, like I think that would be super interesting.
I think that'd be pretty dope. That's a really great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's like an in between there too of like an educational piece, right? Like I think the three of us have worked in interesting places where we have a lot of insight into maybe the way the product is made, maybe the way the product goes to market, maybe even how the product is sent out to YouTubers and influencers and celebrities and athletes and all that stuff. But there's just a general lack of attention to that kind of like middle section where like it's a old traditional public relations PR role that kind of has to be like upscaled to next level for people to have like the insight and also build the trust to have somebody to come in and like tell their story of a shoe. I think the one thing that is actually kind of like what you're saying there, Tiffany, is like that Sean Wotherspoon shoe. I feel like him actually going to Nike, being a part of that Air Max Day campaign and being able to create that is the closest thing we've seen to what you're talking about, where his passion for the stuff like won him the little design contest and, like kind of got him as like, I mean, he's definitely like celebrity status at this point. And I would say that like the success of that and the success of the products that they created out of that is probably some of the best stuff that we've seen in a couple of years in terms of like storytelling and, you know, colorway and the energy and the Volkswagen bus they did, like that stuff. It doesn't happen very often, and that's kind of the closest thing that we've got to it. But I 100% agree. I think it would be really awesome if the brands really kind of like owned what they were trying to do and brought in, you know, the people that really lived through those stories that they're trying to tell.
I mean, this is totally off subject, but how many like VW buses does Nike have? Such a random thought, because I was at their Melrose store last night, which is something that we'll probably talk about in another episode. Really interesting sort of retail concept there. But they had like a VW bus upstairs, and I was like, how many of these things does Nike have? Did they just go and buy up all of the old school VW bugs and get them like refurbished, and now they're like reconditioned and brand new? I don't know. I'm sorry. I know I kind of broke the seriousness there, but yeah, I don't know. Sorry, it just popped in my head again when you said the VW bug. I was like, I wonder.
It is kind of funny though, because they've had buses at like a lot of the running shoe launches. Like there must be backstory to that, right?
Yeah, I'm like, are there 5 and like they just repaint them, or is there, you know, or do they have like a lot of 20 or 30 and they're like, oh, we're gonna do an activation, and somebody's like, email Todd, and Todd sits at a junkyard or at like the Nike yard with the VW buses, and he's like, what do you need? We've got it. We need a blue one today. We need a blue one today. And Todd's like, I got you. This is the React VW? Perfect. And we're going to New York, and he drives it cross country himself, and it's like full of Nikes in the back, and has like a Nike license. Okay, all right, now I'm going too far. All right.
There is a backstory though, right? Didn't Phil sell shoes out of the back of one? Like I remember in pre-haul they have that, yeah. So, but I've seen a few in the parking garage in my day. I will say that. But I don't know if they were employee owned or Nike owned. Like some of them don't have any badging.
So they're like blank slate.
Yeah, and it's Portland, right? That might just be somebody's like, you know, ecological approach to living, right? So
I should check Craigslist. This could be a business. This could be a side business. Sell V-dubs.
Yeah, selling V-dubs. That's hilarious. This is the Outside the Box podcast. It is brought to you by the good folks at Race Lacers. If you ever thought you were the best at tying your shoes, and when I say the best at tying your shoes, I mean like the top 0.1% in the country, then you need to be talking to the people at Race Lacers. So we're not talking about you people who didn't know how to tie your shoes until you were like 4 or 5. We want the people that were early. I mean, if you were 2 or 3 years old and you're like, Mom, I've got this, I think you have a place in the Race Lacers. So they're a good sponsor of the show, so make sure you check them out. Look up Race Lacers on Instagram, on Twitter, and on the internet. They are a good sponsor for our show, and we appreciate everything that they do. So before we get out of here, there is one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and it's about trust. I trust that everything that Tiffany says is true. I trust that everything that Nick says is true. I trust that most of the stuff that I say is nonsense. So we were looking at an article from this place called Fashion United about some of the most trusted brands, and it's broken down by U.S. millennials and Generation Z. And it seems that millennials, which we figured are people that were born in the late 80s, early 90s, those people, they trust Nike. Nike is the number 1 most trusted brand, and there is not another sneaker brand in the top 10, which I found very, very interesting. And they also really trust Oreos at number 4, and Target and Google at number 7. The Google, I think, makes sense because you do your Googles, and that makes sense.
But now, it's mostly food. Like, everyone trusts food.
It is most, yeah. I mean, millennials, they're at their foodies. I mean, they take pictures of their food. They're like they're 20 to 30-year-old, and you know, if you follow any of them, you know that's lots of food and shoes on their.
Yeah, actually, the only other one in the top 10 that's not, you know, a food or like a website is the North Face.
Yeah, that's interesting. And PayPal's in there too, which I think is pretty cool as well.
You should trust them.
Yeah.
Now,
Dealing with your money.
you should just.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, they're dealing with their money.
If you don't trust them, there's a problem.
Yeah, and then for Generation Z, which are like the teenagers right now, their number one most trusted brand is Oreos, which I feel like that's an age thing. That has to be an age thing. I feel like when you're young, like Oreos, food, like sweets, like that works. But number two is Nike. So Nike spans the generation from, let's say, 13 years old to maybe, let's say, 36. Those are all, like, those people trust Nike, number one and number two. But if you're younger, let's say 21 to 13, you actually trust Under Armour as well. Missing from the list is Adidas, and also missing from the list is Reebok. So I find that both of those missing is interesting, especially considering how popular Adidas is right now. You would think that they would be in that list of most trusted brands, but unfortunately they're not in the top 10. However, if you're M&M's, you make number 6 on both of those lists, and I think that's a win for everybody, if we're going to be honest.
And then, of course, you got Amazon on both lists, too. Amazon at 7 for the Generation Z and 3 for the Millennials, so...
Yeah, it's an interesting list, and I can say that I would say that I trust the list that they've put together. They have like Kraft Mac and Cheese, Little Debbie. I think we all love and appreciate those guys. Oddly missing from the millennial list is Apple. I would assume that people trust Apple, but apparently Google is more trusted amongst millennials than Apple is. But the new generation loves Apple because they love their iMessage. So those kids and those crazy cell phones. Yeah. Anything that you guys would add to this list? Looking at this list, is there anything that you feel is missing, or do you feel like it's about accurate as well?
I mean, it's all food. It's almost all food. I just can't get over the fact that it's all food. Like, what makes you trust a food company? Because you've never gotten sick, or like, it's the packaging is always nice or something. It's always reliable. It's always there. You can always find it. I think that's fascinating. And not to mention with the Generation Z, the Oreo's at 75%. Like, that's a very high percentage. Like, even with millennials at Nike, it was at 65%, and that was the number one. So, yeah, I think there's a bunches I could say that are missing off here. Like, I don't know, like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or an Ace. Like, they always seem to be pretty trustworthy.
I would agree with that.
Nordstrom, you can return anything you want. Did you guys hear that someone returned tires to a Nordstrom?
Oh my gosh, no.
Wait.
That's great.
I'm bringing in a new topic. Sorry, Jacques.
Oh, no, this is fine. I love this.
There's a story that, Nordstrom's return policy, they'll basically take back anything, right? Like, doesn't matter how long you've had it, used, whatever. So some people a guy returned tires, and they don't sell tires, and they gave him money back. They took them in. They took the tires in. I'll Google the article, but yeah, it's online somewhere that Nordstrom actually returned a product that they never made.
That's so crazy.
All right, and
trust.
And with that, let's wrap up the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Outside the Box podcast. I am Jacques Slade. I can be found all over the internet at KUSTOO. That is Cousteau. But again, this show just wouldn't be what it is without the other two voices that you hear. Look, I am the sexy radio voice, okay? But these two, they are the producer and they are the radio station that keep this show going. Without them, I'm just a guy with a great voice. But them, they make this all a complete package. So, Nick, tell them who you are. Tell them where they can find you.
Nick Engvall, NickEngvall on all platforms. I'm just a guy that loves sneakers and loves talking to people about sneakers. Really, I'm just here to learn from our wait, what did you call it, Doc?
She's plastics.
That's right. Our plastics engineer. Tiffany, tell them how they can find you.
Tiffany Beers at all social media, YouTube and Instagram. It's TIFFANYB as in boy, EERS.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you for listening or watching if you're watching over on YouTube. And then don't forget, make sure you hit us on Outside Pods on Twitter and Instagram. Is that it's Outside Pods on Instagram, right? As well, Nick? Hit us up if you have any feedback, if there's any questions, or just hit us up individually on our Twitters or Instagrams if there's anything you want to see on the show, anything you want us to talk about. As always, we appreciate you guys, and we'll see and hear you next week. You guys take it easy. Peace.